Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining this year's Gibsons Environmental All Candidates meeting. This meeting is sponsored by the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association, also known as the SCCA, in partnership with Alliance for Democracy and the Sunshine Coast Climate Action Network. My name is Kylie Hutchinson, and I'm going to be moderating the session tonight. So our goal is to encourage all citizens to engage in the electoral process and to help you learn where your candidates stand on the critical issues facing our community. I just want to start off by acknowledging that we're coming to you from the traditional unceded and stolen lands of the Squamish people, specifically the town of Caucus, also known as Gibsons. And I just want to acknowledge the stewardship that our First Peoples have had with the land and water since time immemorial, and how grateful I am to be able to live, work, and play on these unceded lands. So a little bit of context about tonight's meeting. So, as I'm sure all of you are acutely aware, global climate change is the greatest environmental threat or challenge ever to confront humanity. So we all know the list: drought, which we know intimately right now, wildfires, fierce storms, floodings, famine, warming oceans, sea level rise, and also mass species extinction. And on October 15th, voters all across BC will elect new government councils. And they will be governing for the next 4 years. And I think it's really important to note that there are very crucial, time-sensitive decisions that need to be made by this next cohort of local government about how our communities will respond to these extremely serious challenges. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get going tonight. This whole session will be recorded, and it will be shown on 3 places: the SCCA's YouTube channel, on their website, and also on social media. So if you're uncomfortable being on social media, then I suggest that you turn your camera off. And if you need some help in doing that, then just please post something in the chat, and then our tech, Riley, SCCA Riley, will be able to help you. Please stay on mute for the duration of the meeting. We all, as you know, we all don't want to hear your dog or your coffee or your soup or your slurping or anything like that. And in terms of the meeting format, we're going to start off with each candidate giving themselves a 2-minute introduction. And traditionally in these sessions, we've given the candidates 5 questions to answer, but we have such a large number of candidates. We've got 9 on the call tonight that there wasn't enough time to have everybody answer every one of the 5 questions that were previously posed to the candidates. So what we're going to do is every candidate is going to answer the question on water quality and the watershed management and our drinking water. And then each candidate was also allowed to pick 2 of the remaining 4 questions, which they will speak on. So we're going to go through all of those questions first, and they will have 1 minute to answer each one of those questions. And then we will move it to you. We will take questions from the floor. Now, it's very important that if you have a question that you want to ask a candidate, you must put it into the chat. We will not be unmuting people and having people speaking live in the session. So if you have a question for the candidate and you can direct it to a specific candidate or all candidates, please put that into the chat. These questions will be vetted to me, the moderator, by 2 SCCA volunteers, and they're basically just going to be weeding out redundant questions or making sure that questions are on topic. We're going to give you a few more details about that just before we start the public part of the chat. If you have any questions about Zoom, then just don't hesitate to put them into the chat. Our tech, SCCA Riley, will answer them for you. If you have any questions about the process tonight, put those into the chat as well, and Suzanne from the SCCA will be the one monitoring, and she will be the one responding to you for that. Great. I think then it's time to start with our introductions. We're going to do this alphabetically and anti-alphabetically. So each candidate 2 minutes. Our first candidate to introduce themselves, Philip Young. If we can start the timer, Philip, if you want to unmute yourself, and when you see the timer ready to go, then please go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself, Phil. And you're still muted. There we go.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and just wait.
Very good. Thank you. I am born in the colony of Hong Kong. I was born as a British. From young age, I learned English, and then until immigration into Canada, I'm talking English as well. In Hong Kong, I was a lecturer, a teacher in university, and also as a medical technologist in hospital. So in the morning, I go to teaching post. And in the evening, I keep my job as a medical technologist in the hospital. That is my lifestyle in Hong Kong. And in 1986, I landed in Vancouver. Over there, I am a realtor, helping the development of a housing project. And at the same time, I also help my children to learn different languages as well. And in the past 10 years, I have been engaged in the Vancouver Chinese Elderly Citizen Association as a senior club, helping them to solve problems and also help them to move into care home as well. In that case, then I learned fundraising to build care home. That is my usual job in the past. I have a good family. My wife, Debbie, and also my son, second son, and my daughter are all UBC, student, alumni. Right here, I like to let you know that my wife support me to go into, running a seat in the mayor of Gibsons. In that case, then I can use my past experience in commercial teaching into practice so that we can help the society in Gibson as a whole. Let them go into a better living environment and also their future. Thank you.
Phil. Thank you, Phil. Okay, and our next to speak is Silas. Silas, just wait for the timer and then you can go.
My name is Silas White. I'm running for the mayor of Gibsons. I was born and raised on the Sunshine Coast. I've lived here 18 years. I'm a book publisher and a local government consultant. I've served on council before for 4 years, as well as 9 years on the school board. And I just have a quick opening speech here that the last several years have been challenging on everyone, especially our community here in Gibsons, our small community. And this election is so important to determine where we go from here. How we rebuild our community coming out of a pandemic, how we regroup to address the housing crisis, mental health and infrastructure challenges, and especially climate change, and how we make local government matter to the people of Gibsons today, including many newcomers to our community. I am running for mayor because I am ready to ensure our next 4 years as a community are transformative, innovative, and positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Silas. And the next to speak is Leslie Thompson. Leslie, just wait for your timer. You want to unmute yourself, Leslie? There you go. Unmute. You're still muted, Leslie. There we go. Okay, you're ready to go. Yep, just wait for the timer.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Leslie Thompson, and I'm a resident of the Sunshine Coast, live just past Langdale. I'm standing to appear for the candidate of the mayoral candidate for the town of Gibsons. I've been around for 13 years. I think this is the only time you would get to hear about just myself as a person. So having born and brought up in the Middle East in Oman and lived in England, where I finished a majority of my education, worked for half of my life in Dubai with the airline, responsible for the airline out of Dubai, which was Emirates, and then moved 13 years back to the Sunshine Coast, where we started up a bakery cafe, and me and my partner have been there since then. I'm standing for elections for the mayor of Gibsons because I think I've got the leadership skills that Gibsons as a town needs. It is my understanding that the community is well protected. We live in a beautiful seaside town, and therefore there are lots of things that needs to be done, which I would be happy to lead as a leader. With the collaboration, not just of council, but also the population, both in Gibsons and on the Sunshine Coast. It is very important that we engage our population in order to get things done collectively rather than single-handedly. And therefore, it is my pleasure to be here sitting with you today. I will describe in length my understanding on various topics and where I come from. But I'd like you to ask some questions at the end of this interview. Thank you again. And again, thank you to all the stakeholders for inviting us. It is my pleasure.
Thank you, Leslie. So those were our three candidates for mayor. So we're going to start now with the councillors. And the next one to come is Greg Suen. If I'm saying that correct, Suen? And
absolutely.
Great. Just wait for the timer, Greg, and away you go. Good start now, Greg.
My name is Greg Suen, 35 years on the Sunshine Coast, born and raised in Vancouver. And most of my life was spent in Vancouver and the city of Ottawa, working for both Telesat Canada and TELUS. Lucky enough to get transferred back here, and that took me up to the coast here. I have two daughters, one in New York and one in Vancouver. And much of my activity has been involved in public service. This job is public service. Yes, we have three areas of responsibility, being representing all of you and dealing with policy matters and also serving as stewards for our assets and finances, and I understand that. Each of my activities, be it Rotary or pulling together or even being a wedding commissioner, always brings collaboration to mind. It is an imperative, and as has been mentioned by my two predecessors on here, it's an ideal time because we need that collaboration. And I've seen it. I've seen evidence of already in recent days. So it gives me great hope. And as council member, I certainly am dedicated to transparency, collaboration, and working on substantive solutions to all of the issues that we have. Thank you very much. Privileged to be here.
Thank you, Greg. And next up we have is Blake Mcleod. If you want to unmute yourself, Blake, and just wait for the timer.
Yeah, I'm running for council in Gibsons, and been on the coast for 6 years, formerly Vancouver, where I served on many community associations, served my local politicians, both provincially and federally, and spent a lot of time campaigning for them. I've been active in climate issues at a I guess an activist level, a protest level, lots of marches. I think a lot of us probably have done that. And I've been keenly interested for many, many years, got a couple of kids, really concerned about their future. And I'm hearing from the community an awful lot of concern as well. So, you know, context is important. We know that the Industrial Revolution led to a sudden demand for carbon source fuel. And, you know, it's going to be expensive to clean it up. And we have to ask ourselves who's going to pay. So I'm supporting the Sue Big Oil campaign because well, I can talk to that later because it's one of my things. In my written responses to the 5 questions, organizers will note I was careful to not only commit to those things that a municipal councillor is responsible for. I promise to try hard to do my best in the role in all aspects of those duties. I will work together with colleagues to find a balance. And I think I can speak for others in this, that the potential collapse of the Earth's life-sustaining biosphere is the biggest issue facing humanity today. We must work together as a council and with staff to help reduce that risk. The town of Gibsons has been a leader in the protection of natural assets. Much of this work has happened because of grants from higher levels of government. Those relationships and the ongoing work of town staff to recognize and capitalize on them has and will continue to be important. The next council must cooperatively improve on that work, supporting staff and keeping the bar high. We will depend on community groups such as the SCCA and other climate leaders for trustworthy information and inspiration. Finally, we know that the work of Indigenous people are doing to reclaim pride and place is being confounded. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Stafford Lumley. Just wait for the timer.
Good evening. My name is Stafford Lumley. I'm running for council. I've served 2 terms already. I've lived in the Sunshine Coast since 2003, raised 3 daughters here, have a business, Smitty's Oyster House. I'd never considered myself any kind of environmental expert, but I can tell you that when the environment is involved in any decision a councillor has to make, it's an important one, which was tested in my 2nd term, where the engineering and I probably shouldn't say this, but they were going to take a trail and make it into a multi-purpose trail. And the idea of the Gospel Rock Trail was actually like just a foot trail. So I worked with the SCCA to prevent any of that happening, and also worked towards a covenant that seemed to be slightly going off the rails. So I think when it matters, if you work with the right people to the common goal, I think you're going to accomplish things. And I'm certainly, after that experience, I certainly believe that that's what we should continue to do. Work with experts in the field, because as I said, I'm not an environmental expert, but I would like to do anything I can to preserve the environment and our living conditions in the town of Gibsons. So that's it.
Thank you, Stafford. Okay, and next up we have Dez Delaney. Just wait for the timer, Des.
Hi, my name's Desmond Delaney. I've lived in Gibsons for the last 6 years. My involvement with the coast goes back to my wife's parents since 1987. Originally from New Zealand, a little island at the other end of the world. This topic is something that 50 years ago, I was personally involved in. This is part of our culture and DNA in New Zealand. It's not a new thing. It is embedded in the whole country. In 1900s, New Zealand, along with the US, at that stage, were one of the first countries in the world to instigate natural asset management into the Municipal Act and adhere to it. A lot of it's to do with a lot of the topography is similar to what we have here. We have the flooding, we have the extreme events. And so as a result of living in that little island at the end of the world and having to survive on it, people come together to make things work. I'm involved in the construction management industry, or have been for the last several decades. I'm very familiar with all the environmental regulations, the impact, sustainability, and I can tell you that in this day and age, if you don't combine them all into a project, it will be a failure. You have to address every aspect of just how everything comes together. It cannot be looked at in different little segments as a whole. And as Gibsons goes through this phase over the next 4 years, I feel I can contribute a lot to this balance through my knowledge and basic understanding, and just coming from all the different perspectives. So you'll hear more about that during this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Des. And next we have Anne-Marie de Andrade. Just wait for the timer.
Thank you. My name is Anne-Marie de Andrade. I was born in Toronto and live part of my life in Brazil. I've lived in Gibsons for the past 10 years, and I have family here who dates from the first settler, George Gibson. I care deeply about this community. I have over 20 years experience managing environmental and community interests, working federal agencies and with federal agencies, developing collaborative partnerships and programs with regional, provincial, and local governments. I have a master's degree in natural resource management from the University of UBC and a certificate in human resource management from the Simon Fraser University. I'm running for re-election because I believe my experience will help the new council continue the pathway towards a more sustainable future that this current council has led. Climate change is real, is here, and is affecting the world in unprecedented ways with extreme everything, extreme weather, heat, fire, flooding, and drought, among others. Urbanization is another force that can leave deep scars in our landscapes and further exacerbate issues such as the urban island heat dome effect that we saw for the past 2 years in our town. But we have good science and traditional knowledge that can help us deal with such impacts. The town of Gibsons has been a leader in natural asset management, which has proved to be beneficial both financially and environmentally. And we haven't run out of water, neither flooded in the past years. And this is a sign that we are making the right investments to protect the environment and create climate resilience. I have actively supported this work for the past 4 years and will continue to support if I am elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And our final introduction is from David Kroll.
I'd like to thank the SCCA for this opportunity. I'm David Kroll. I'm running for Gibsons Council for re-election. I first moved to Gibsons 43 years ago to work on the beachcombers and never really left. I've been involved with Marine Search and Rescue, the Hospice Society, and a few other community groups prior to election. And then with election, I've liaised on several communities and boards. My CV looks like a patchwork quilt. It's, I've worked in the construction industry, retail sales, marketing, property management, construction, the hospitality industry. And along the way, I've gleaned useful tools that I'm still using today. We're faced with some huge challenges. Climate undoubtedly is the big thing. And what really concerns me is what we are leaving future generations, not only from a point of infrastructure within the town, affordability within the town. We're losing young people. We have a problem with seniors aging in place. So the challenges are many. I think there's a unique opportunity for community engagement and having a council that's accessible to the community. And I look forward to working for the challenges, and hopefully we can work together to provide a future to coming generations. Right now it's looking bleak, but I think we have an opportunity to turn things around and work together. And when I say together, I'm talking like on a larger scale, not only provincially, federally, but globally, to mitigate what we're facing with the climate challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I just want to note there's 2 candidates that unfortunately weren't able to attend tonight, Christy Thompson and Bob Norris, but they both did send a short statement, which I'm just going to read right now. So Christy Thompson says, thank you to the Sunshine Coast Conservation Authority Association for inviting me to the All Candidates Forum. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend the forum this evening as I am in Vancouver attending the Zero Waste Conference. I would like to say to the group gathered tonight that it is my feeling that environmental issues should no longer be considered a single platform issue as they once were. The impacts of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and the need for protection from further biodiversity loss should be considered in all aspects of our town's governance. If given the opportunity, these issues will be a major part of my activity as a town councillor of Gibsons. As we look forward, let's work to ensure a healthy environment for all. And then from Bob Norris, he says, I'd like to offer my apologies to those attending and to the SCCA for not being able to be at tonight's event in person. I am out of town and do not have access to Zoom. Please be aware that I support all scientifically based approaches to dealing with environmental issues and the efforts of the SCCA to preserve the natural biodiversity of the Sunshine Coast. I consider myself an environmentalist and believe environmental issues will form the base of many important issues we face in our time, both locally and internationally. I hope my answers to the written questions that have been presented will give you a better idea of my positions on specific issues. I hope to meet with you in person in the very near future to answer your questions directly. So now we'll move to the established questions. These were questions that were sent to the candidates in advance of this meeting tonight. Just a reminder, every candidate is going to answer the question on watershed and drinking water quality. And then there will be, candidates have chosen to answer selected questions after that. So to start, I think it's really important to note here that there's many actions that our local governments in British Columbia can take to both mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss. And as elected officials, it will fall to you to lead the way to protect these natural systems and these assets and the benefits that they provide to us and our community. It's really important to note that all of the questions that are about to be posed to the candidates in this forum are within the jurisdiction of the local government. So our first question is on watershed protection and sustainable drinking water supply. So the SCRD in the town of Gibsons supply drinking water to over 30,000 residents on the Sunshine Coast. And the primary sources for most residents are the Chapman and Grey Creek watersheds. And there's secondary water sources, include groundwater sources, the Elphinstone Gibson Somes source, and also the Hopkins Langdale aquifers, which is also known as the West Howe Sound watershed. Like most rural areas in British Columbia, the Sunshine Coast faces ongoing and increasing resource extraction pressures in our drinking watersheds, mainly from logging. Each local government on the coast has different and overlapping opportunities to advance water supply and water source area conservation. If elected, how will you support the town to diligently protect the Gibsons Aquifer and the West Howe Sound watershed aquifer recharge areas from risks? We're going to start with David Kroll. Please go ahead, David, when you see the timer.
Thank you. I ran for council back in 2004, and at that time, we had a referendum on the ballot, which was for meters. And it was something I didn't get elected, but I'm very proud in my campaigning for that election. I really pushed the need for water meters, something that's happened in Gibsons, and it's shown through conservation what we're able to do, going from 900 liters a day to around 300 liters per day per person. Now, as in my past term, not only working in Gibsons to support staff, we've petitioned ministers with Moti, forests, mining, to protect the aquifer beyond our borders, the recharge area. There's a lot of things that happen that we don't have a voice on, and we need a very loud voice to protect what is beyond our boundaries. 2 weeks ago, I was at UBC.
Thank you, David. And next up, we have Anne-Marie. You're muted, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, you're still muted. You're muted.
Sorry, I thought you were controlling.
Just wait. There you go.
Thank you. Gibson has been a leader in water management on the Sunshine Coast and has spearheaded the conversation on water governance and water security with neighbor governments. Council has been very supportive and interested in creating a watershed governance model with the province, the SRD, the district of Sechelt, the Squamish and Sechelt nations, and local NGO such as SCCA to ensure the long-term sustainability of the drinking water supply on the coast and in particular in Gibsons. On September 13, as Councillor Kroll mentioned, elected officials and staff from the town of Gibsons and the SRD met with the Minister of Forest, Catherine Convoy, to discuss protection measures and governance models for the West Coast Sound watershed aquifer recharge areas to prevent activities such as deforestation and development from impacting the integrity of aquifers 560 and 552. Sorry for the rush. I have only 1 minute.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And next we have Dez Delaney.
Yes, this is a very important thing that we must address. The 95 wells that we have in Aquifer 560 is, we need to know what water is coming out of them. Of those 95 Gibsons, there's only a few. A couple of the other major ones. All our concrete is made with water from that aquifer. Every time you see a concrete truck driving down the road, that's 1 cubic meter of water was used in that. We must document and have data. And as I said earlier, you need to understand the linkage between development, sustainable development, all the impacts it has. Water is not only for drinking, it is so many other things that we use it for, and we must get very good data on it and make the decisions based on that. And they're going to be hard decisions if the data does not support some common held beliefs right now on what our future is.
Thank you, Des. Next up is Stafford.
Thanks. We just had an update from the water line, which is a very important organization that we get our water facts from. And again, almost like my original speech, the town is small. Council gets pushed on a lot of things, and the staff. We have to work with the SCCA, Squamish Nation, the province, and the SCRD at the watershed. Like this is a place where we have to lean on other organizations and be advocates, especially to the province, with respect to logging licenses and development in our watershed. And again, this is another way that the SCCA can help the town with their efforts that they can put forward that the town might not be able to just because of its size and its resources. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Stafford. And next up is Blake.
Like Stafford, I'm not an environmental expert, but none of us can help but see what's going on around us and be concerned. I've done a fair bit of studying on how the aquifer recharge area works, performs. I also understand that the town has deep development permit areas that act to protect the aquifer and therefore all of our interests. We have a potential built out to 10,000 people. The studies just come in again recently on that, confirming that, and we're in a good position, but we can't rest on that because there's going to be continuing demands. We have a population increase of about 1% a year, and there are a few projects coming online that probably are going to cause a lot of people some concern around the issue of water. And council, the job of council and the staff is going to be to outreach and communicate. And I would really like to see more of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. And Greg.
Thank you. Overall, it looks as though Gibsons has a pretty thorough understanding of the size and limits of its water supply. That will not protect it from bad management and development decisions. The perceived imperative is to get bigger. That often gets in the way of rational planning. The goal is, in fact, to increase population to 10,000 in 20 years, a doubling of the current population. So how we handle it is important. And we have advocacy, as has been mentioned. There's been a work in the past, 2 studies done to look after Mount Elphinstone and what's left. A novel one, though, that may be as simple as a program that used to replace toilet seats and toilets for water consumption. How about simple water barrels? Have a subsidy program, public can buy into it, and we collect water and have a greater source of supply for cleaning, washing, maybe drinking.
Okay. So those are our 6 candidates for councillor, and now let's hear from our candidates for mayor. Next up is Leslie.
Thanks, Kylie. So having Gibsons voted the best water in 2007 by the UN, I'm really surprised nobody's gone into the business of bottling good, clean water for the world. So I think for the business owners around there, I think that's something that somebody might be interested in. Having said that, it's definitely an absolute necessity. It was a recommendation, both 2013 the waterline study and the 2022 waterline updates, that there was a necessity for good water. I know just in the past 2 days, Gibsons has agreed to share the water with the SCRD brothers and sisters, because there was a big shortage of water out at the SCRD regional district. So, which is good with Gibsons. Talking about the aquifer, it is an extreme risk.
Thank you, Leslie. And next up is Silas. There you are, Silas.
Hi, so I just heard a new idea there. So I want to make it really clear that, I appreciate new ideas, but I'm really opposed to the idea of privatizing our water source and bottling it. I appreciate the suggestion there, but that kind of scares me. Also, it would require another water license too. That any business wanting to bottle water would have to compete with the town of Gibsons for a water license. So this coming term, though, my plan is to lead our town to work more closely and collaboratively with the provincial government, the Squamish Nation, and SCRD to protect our recharge area and to responsibly co-manage our natural asset. I especially want to apply my successful experience in advocacy to get provincial support to protect our aquifer and finally launch a co-governance model with the Squamish and Seashell nations.
Silas. And finally, we have Phil. Just unmute yourself, Phil. You're muted, Phil. You need to unmute yourself. And then just wait for the timer. Unmute yourself, Phil.
Yeah, okay. Today I met a lady, okay, on the street. She told me that water is the most important for the whole area, Sunshine and the Gibson. However, in Gibson, we are lucky. We have some underground water to help us, okay, to solve the problem so far, okay, so good. However, in the long term, we must have reservoir. We must reservoir, okay, store water for future use. Watershed. This water come in from the high mountain onto the floodplain. We have to make full use of this as drinking water for 30,000 people or 5,000 people in Gibson. Therefore, I recommend that education is most important. Educate people how to save, how to use water properly, not wasting them. And then all segments of the society must help in order to fulfill this long-term situation. We have good water, and also this water is very healthy. Thank you.
So we're now going to move on with the remaining 4 questions that we have. And just remember that each candidate has picked 2 of these 4 questions. So for the next question, we've got 4 candidates, and this one is about joining the Climate Caucus. So elected officials need to support and lead well on climate change issues, and the Climate Caucus is a nonpartisan network of local elected officials plus 1,000 other allies across Canada. And the mission of the Climate Caucus is to create and implement socially just policies which align with the global climate, biodiversity, and ecosystem services and reconciliation targets. The question is, if elected, will you commit to engaging with the Climate Caucus and ensuring that all council and/or board decisions are considered through the lens of mitigating climate change, protecting biodiversity, and sustainably managing natural assets? Our first person up speaking is Silas. 1 minute, Silas.
So I would absolutely engage with the Climate Caucus. I see many of our current Sunshine Coast elected officials are very involved in the Climate Caucus, including our neighbor in Area E, Donna McMahon. I've really grown to value over all my time in local government the engagement with other communities and learning from other communities. Many of the contacts that I have around the province and in the provincial government were originally people I met as a school trustee for 9 years, as a counselor for 4 years, and it's just invaluable, the experience of getting ideas from other communities, sharing ideas. I can share a couple. With the school district, we became one of the leading solar panel districts in the province, largely because of influence from districts in the lower or the Vancouver Island.
Thank you, Silas. And next we have is Greg.
Thank you. I would immediately join with the Climate Caucus. I first learned about that through my oldest daughter, Jackie, in New York. As we know, it's not just a provincial, not just a national, but it's an international organization. And certainly there's going to be different flavors as you move from the United States to Canada, and that's a healthy thing. But overall, its purpose and history already is remarkable. It's showing the power of numbers. When you can't do it legislatively, sometimes you have to turn to the groups such as we're talking about right now. So it would be a matter of advocacy, as has been mentioned. That's part of the job of a councillor, one of the three main areas. And I see this as being a very key area. We may not be able to legislate, but we can certainly put pressure on to all of the groups.
Thank you, Greg. And next we have Dez Delaney.
Okay, make this easy. Absolutely support joining the Climate Caucus, but only with a proviso that number 2, improve environmental regulation through environmental DPAs is included in that as well. Advocacy is one thing, but right now action is more important to be combined with advocacy. You are more effective at advocating if you can also show by example that you are able to do action items as well. There's very simple technologies that we can use to action while we advocate. I don't think the two are exclusive between the two of them. I think they work together. So I think that a combination of 1 and 2 definitely it needs to happen sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dez. And just a heads up, you might want to look at your other camera. And finally, we have David Kroll.
Thanks.
Thank you. I actually joined the Climate Caucus in 2018. I found it a great resource for information. Through the Climate Caucus, I motioned the town of Gibsons to join the city's Race to Zero, and we were part of the COP26 delegation and petition in Glasgow. As a result of the city's Race to Zero, we're also part of Cities Race to Resilience. We had a review of our strategic plan, and it has been adjusted, and we're reviewing everything through the climate lens. We also have staff. Michelle Lewis on our staff is engaged with the Climate Caucus. She's providing information to them on natural asset resources. And we're in the throes of reviewing DPAs 1 and 2 to make them put more teeth in them with respect to what we're faced with climate change and the environment. So it's a great resource. I heartily recommend anyone who's elected to join it.
Okay. The next question is all about environmental development permit areas, also known as EDPAs. And these are one of the few legal tools that local governments have to mitigate the impacts of private land development. And EDPAs are clearly identified areas within which development and land alteration must be regulated in order to protect natural assets and environmentally sensitive areas. However, if DPA guidelines are not clear or supported with permitting policies and bylaws, they may become cumbersome or ineffective. As an elected official, will you commit to supporting the creation, use, and improvement of EDPAs, including bylaws and policies, to protect ecological and natural asset values in your community and throughout the Sunshine Coast? We've got 5 candidates who signed up to answer this question. The first one is Anne-Marie de Andrade.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very aware of the importance of EDPAs as a policy tool to support environmental protection, biodiversity conservation, and climate resilience. I particularly lobby really hard to council to update the EDPA in this past 4 years. We are successful. We just put a request for proposal. I also engage in many reviews myself on the request for proposal to put wording that supported the goals of the Biosphere Reserve and also include protection of key habitats such as wildlife corridors and habitat for keystone species. And I lobby for more funding. We moved from having $25,000 to 40. And I also supported the tree preservation bylaw, which is a policy to support EDPAs. And also getting a registered professional biologist with long-term experience.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And next up is Stafford. You're muted, Stafford.
Next. Just following up with Anne-Marie said, the recent, this council is getting updates on DPA 1 and 2, both environmentally sensitive areas. And then I guess what we have to do at that point is we have to, we have to take that information and protect these environmentally sensitive areas against, some strong residential development. Also, the DPA, I think it's DPA 1, also has a resort designation, but so we just have to take what we learn from these and implement them into our zoning. And I think we also have to update our OCP to include any of these updates or any of the findings or sensitive areas that we have to protect. It would call for an OCP update, so I'd be all in favor for that.
Thank you, Stafford. And next up is Greg Suen.
A vital part of it that's, as we discovered, is policy oriented. The advocacy we've talked about, but as has been mentioned both by Anne-Marie and Stafford, it does also allow some policy efforts to be made, and they should be continued. Again, there was the policy for development permit area 9 of going back some time, and now BPAs 1 and 2. Very important to update the OCP with that, which has been learned from all of them. And who knows how they can be extended. They might be moderated or improved as time goes on based on what we learn as well. So very much in favor of pursuing that to a higher degree and giving it all the effort, both in terms of advocacy, but also in policy area as well.
Thank you, Greg. And next we have Leslie Thompson.
Thanks. Thanks, Kylie. So yes, 100% in favor of the environmental DPAs. It is because it's actionable within the authority of the LGA and an opportunity to act quickly and decisively on climate change. Low efforts, high impact rewards, something that is easily done and achievable. Following graphics from the Stantic survey that was done on behalf of Gibsons back in June 2022. There's some stats that is out there, which is quite informative if you want to have a look at that. But however, the town of Gibsons has not kind of advertised that under its climate change tab. The science architectural software, which is the BIM, which is again another one that is interesting. So let's keep it lower efforts, high impacts. Let's look after the fruits that are low, which is achievable at the moment.
Thank you, Leslie. I also, just to be fair, Leslie, I just want to give you a tip to look at that camera. The one you're looking at right now is better. And last on this question is Silas.
So there is some unfinished business kind of hanging for the next council. This being one of them, in that I did see a lot of discussion go on for especially the last couple of years on getting these DPAs updated and reviewed. And an RFP has even gone out to move that forward with a consultant. It's a very detailed RFP, and I will commit if I'm elected the mayor, that this is one of the things that absolutely will not be held up by the next council. This needs to move forward just as quickly as it's been going, even prioritized. So there are other things that will need to be reviewed. This isn't one of them. It needs to go ahead very strongly. And then we need to do an OCP update, as other candidates have mentioned. We need to update our OCP on the latest science, the latest climate science, and aquifer mapping.
Okay, that's it for our second question. Our third question is all about Sue Big Oil. So as we are learning now, for decades, the oil and gas corporations have known that burning fossil fuels would cause heat waves and wildfires, drought and flooding that we are now experiencing in British Columbia. These multinational companies spent millions of dollars to deceive, deny, and distract us on the way to billions of profits, estimated at $3 billion per day for the past 50 years. By preventing action on climate change, West Coast Environmental Law is spearheading a Sue Big Oil campaign to force oil and gas corporations to pay their fair share for the harm that they're causing. The question is, if elected, will you commit to protecting taxpayers by seeking to recover a fair share of climate costs from fossil fuel companies and setting aside at least $1 per person towards a community fund to sue Big Oil? We have 3 candidates who have signed up to answer this question, and the first one is Phil. Just unmute yourself, Phil. You need to unmute your, there you go.
Okay, yeah. Okay, very good, thank you. Sue Big Oil, it is necessary as a final resort. More towns like Gibson has to be joining together in order to fight for this kind of underprivileged. We have to do this because there's a climate change, human laws, human rights laws, financial causes increasing, and also social causes also disrupted in the process of this kind of pollution process. Therefore, I have conclusion in head. We have to join together all the smaller towns working together. However, without the other level of government to work together, it is not successful. Therefore, I would like to say that educate people what to do. Secondly, in order to reduce, the financial costs, we have to start the job right away.
Thank you, Phil. And next up is Blake Mcleod.
So a couple of weeks ago, there was an event in Roberts Creek. A lot of people gathered, some really great speakers, and opportunities for the different areas, including Gibsons, to sign the petition. I had already made my commitment to one of the campaigners at an earlier event that I went to. And at that meeting, I signed and committed that I would advocate for this in council for the $1 per citizen. It amounts to just something like just under $5,000 for the town of Gibsons. And although there are places for that money that could be spent doing great things, this is the absolute most important issue of our lifetimes. And I feel that this is one piece of a puzzle that can have an incredible impact socially and also within the political spectrum too. It's going to force conversations that have been uncomfortable to have, and we'll have to talk about our relationship with fossil fuels to a greater extent. I absolutely.
And then last on this question is Stafford Lumley.
It's kind of a no-brainer for me. I mean, again, with everything being pushed down to municipalities from provincial and federal governments, the gas tax that we receive every year for a budget, it's really just a drop in the bucket. It's like it's pennies are no longer used, but it feels like we're getting pennies. I know sue's a hard term. Like for me, I don't like saying to sue, but I mean, the top 5 companies, they've already made $35 billion in the first 3 months of this year. I think that they could support these communities who are dealing with all the environmental and climate change that are being committed in the communities from the big oil. So I'm certainly glad to join on board. I think we should definitely get behind this, and it's not expensive at all, $1 a person.
Thank you, Stafford. And if you've just joined us, we're currently just finishing up the last of 5 questions that were sent in advance to all of the candidates. And then once we're finished the last question, then we will be opening the floor up to the public. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask the candidates or direct to a specific candidate, then you can go ahead and type that into the chat now. So the last question is around mitigating climate-induced flooding. So as our climate changes, We're seeing increased average annual rainfall and experiencing more frequent and intense rainfall events and more rapid snowmelt as well. Meanwhile, our average summer rainfall is actually decreasing. These extreme precipitation events are happening more often. They're resulting in increased runoff across a dry landscape. And so the water is not absorbed into the soils or the riparian areas or our aquifers. These conditions create major challenges with runoff and erosion management, increased flood risk, and our source area recharge, our water source area recharge. The estimated costs of rebuilding after the flooding events in last November, is in the billions of dollars. And this doesn't account for long-term impacts on fish, as the flooding occurred when the salmon were just beginning their coming home to spawn. The question posed to candidates are, how will you work with your council to adapt to these extreme and changing conditions, mitigating impacts on communities, infrastructure, and fish habitat? We're going to start with our first candidate, who is David Kroll.
Thank you. You know, we're constantly witnessing climate and weather extremes, totally unprecedented events. We need to ensure that we're using best practices to mitigate these extreme conditions. Last year, during the atmospheric river, we were only touched by the edge of it. And yet we saw major damage to our neighbors' infrastructure and massive impacts to wildlife habitat. We were lucky in Gibsons, our natural asset system worked, but we need to ensure that it keeps working. You referenced the damage in the lower mainland. It was $55 billion just to infrastructure. That didn't include personal losses or wildlife damage. So we need to work together, not only to buffer our own systems for flood, we need to petition the province. We have issues with MOTI, we have issues with forestry, we have issues with mining. So it's critical that we all work together to solve this issue.
Thank you. And next up we have Anne-Marie.
Thank you. I absolutely will continue to support the work that Gibson's doing. This council has been really focused on the climate change mitigation, creating climate resilience. The town's integrated stormwater management approach to utilizing retention ponds to store stormwater and slowly release it to the environment has not only proven to be financially successful, but has also been a powerful tool to control excess runoff across the landscape, reducing flooding and erosion, benefiting water pollution, water quality, fish, and increasing water infiltration and percolation. So these are some of the initiatives that the town just completely nailed. There are many other initiatives that I want to continue to support. The urban forest plan, Charman Creek has been this time tough.
Yeah, Anne-Marie. And next we have Dez Delaney.
Hi, as I mentioned earlier, I'm originally from New Zealand. The events that we saw in Gibsons last year, New Zealand has them every winter. We spend the summer. As an 18-year-old, my summer job was working for what we call catchment boards, which is what everybody's talking about right now. So during the summertime, you actually go out, you identify, you make sure the water flows, you maintain the natural flow, you constantly monitor, you work closely with the adjacent landowners to all the riparian areas. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's actually quite a simple system. As I said before, it's very easy just to bring this naturally in to a municipal level through DPAs and everything else. And you know, successfully every year, as much energy goes into it, it still floods, but we're able to manage the flood as they get worse still.
Thank you, Dez. And next we have Blake Mcleod.
As has been touched on by Councillor Kroll and Councillor DeAndrade, the work that the town has been doing, actually probably for a decade or more, has been very successful. We did, in a way, dodge a bullet with that atmospheric river. There's a lot of focus in the building code on permeable surface And of course, that's being applied to all development permits so that the ground absorbs moisture at all over as great an area of the recharge area as possible. And the work that's being done in the Sharman lands, the stormwater collection and the Sharman Creek rebuild, that's all in process and really constructive. If we approach every stream in our area with that in mind, with repairs in mind and restoration in mind.
Thank you, Blake. And next is Leslie Thompson.
Thanks, Kylie. So let's stop degrading our natural assets that help to mitigate storm waters runoff. It's not just native trees and vegetation, it's also the soil that is involved in it, referred to the unbounded Capilano aquifer. The additional bonus to this is the retention of the carbon storing, carbon sequestering trees, our natural assets, the retention. These natural assets must be protected at all times with very little. It's always nice to see that everybody is saying, let's do that, but very little is actually being done in the last 8-9 years. So let's construct the flood-prone sea rise storm surge areas. We've seen that in Gibsons in 2019, the vegetation stored at 42,000 metric tons of carbon. And in 2019, again, the Gibsons tree and vegetation secured 526 metric tons of.
Thank you, Leslie. And last, we have Phil. So just unmute yourself, Phil. We still.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. Prevention is better than cure. We have to prevent this happening. That's most important. The climate change is due to, the very, we are ignoring, human being ignoring, the connection between human being and the climate. Here, last year, we have a heavy rainfall, in the BC province. An example here, all the water coming through, onto the ground in a day or two, it can be for 1 year. How? It becomes once in a year, or once in 50 years, or once in 100 years, falling rain. This have to be done for us to prevent what's happening in the past. In the coming years, we have to education, we have to let people understand that destruction of the infrastructure will be too costly. And therefore,
so we've now come to the end of the prepared questions, and now it's the and I do want to thank all of the candidates for responding to those questions. And now we're going to take questions from our virtual floor, which is from the public. If you have a question that's focused on an environmental issue, then please post it into the chat. Please try to be clear, concise, and focus on things that local governments have the jurisdiction or the power to deal with. I just want to let you know that we've got a team of 2 people who will be vetting the questions to me, and just to make sure that the questions are on topic and they're not redundant. I will pose the question directly to the candidates. And candidates, if you wish to respond to the question, then please raise your hand using the Zoom function under reactions. And then we will take candidates one at a time. Again, you'll have 1 minute to answer the question. And we will continue in this format until 8:40, and then we will end with closing remarks from each candidate. So our first question is from Ian Wynn, and it is about Akatsum, or the House Sound, which includes the town of Gibsons, was designated as the United Nations Biosphere Region last fall. A few weeks ago, the House Sound Biosphere Region Initiative Society received over $900,000 in federal funding to advance regional conservation projects to help Canada reach its 25 by 25 and 30 by 30 conservation goals. If elected, how will you support the Akatsum House Sound Biosphere Initiative and local conservation partners, such as the SCCA, to advance biodiversity conservation projects on the Sunshine Coast? Candidates, if you would like to answer this question, please raise your hand. The first person we have is Silas White.
So I was extremely pleased to see the success of this. It is something that I supported, the last council supported, and I was a very, very strong advocate in making sure our council supported it and moving it forward. It's just splendid to see this going ahead. For further action, I mean, I think the best answer is whatever I can, whatever opportunity where we can help this initiative move forward, whether it's partnerships, even more funding, we should be there. And I think another special partnership opportunity is to work with the Nicholas Sonntag Marine Center at the Gibsons Public Market, which is also doing marine research.
Silas, and next is David Kroll.
Thank you. I was fortunate enough to be at the presentation of the federal funds towards the biosphere, and Gibsons, with our location, we're sort of at the gateway to the south of the biosphere area. It was mentioned about the Sonntag. The town of Gibsons has already heavily supported an initiative for eelgrass mapping, conservation within the Gibsons recreational water lease. A new policy has just been introduced with respect to vessels mooring in our recreational water lease and protection of eelgrass beds. Buoys have already been established for no anchor zones. So, we are working, but, the money that was presented to the biosphere is upfront money. They have to match those funds and do better. So we need to come up with anything we can to support them, and particularly for the financial sustainability of it.
Thank you. And Anne-Marie de Andrade.
Thank you. Gibson Council has appointed a liaison to sit at the Ocean Watch Action Committee, which is pretty much a committee made up with elected officials and staff to really look at the actions needed to advance the interest of the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. I have been sitting in this committee for 4 years. I have attended 99% of all meetings, and it's incredible because we discuss, we learn, there's researchers that comes, there are projects, and we share information and we bring it back. One of the things that I also did was to pass a motion. Well, I asked the council to pass a motion to have this report brought up together with the staff report, so anyone can go and learn about what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And Dez Delaney.
Yes, I think biosphere regions, they need green economies, and green economies in biospheres that are successful are things like tourism, whereby we can share and educate the people that we can live in these biospheres, that we can celebrate and share the diversity of it. You need to stop and think about the Galapagos Islands, which are an incredible zone. And the reason it can stay that way is and be preserved, it's supported by tourism. And that means the tourism is very controlled, it's very expensive, but people come away from places like that and go, wow, this is incredible. This is what it looks like. We have an opportunity to celebrate this gateway to the biosphere here by sharing it and showing the green economy and how people can live within these regions without destroying it, and linking to all the other subjects that we've been talking about up to this date. Thank you.
Thank you, Des. So the second question that we have from the audience is directed to all the candidates as well. A conservation covenant protecting 16.6 acres of environmentally sensitive lands on Gospel Rock was established in March. As well, Council is committed to extending protection in the Gospel Rock Neighborhood Plan to include the Sharman Creek Ravine. If elected to Gibsons Council, will you honor the town's commitment to secure protection of the rest of those sensitive lands, including the Sharman Creek Ravine? And the first up we have is Blake Mcleod.
Yes.
Thank you. And next we have is Dez Delaney.
Absolutely. It is imperative that Shaman lands and everything else that we have, that we protect them. We really do need, these are just too valuable to even consider further development. So yes, not only these areas, but a lot of other areas must be protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Des. And David Kroll.
Certainly it's, we need to do it, and it's not just the Sharman lands to be incorporated with the already covenanted property in Gospel Rock. There's also the White Tower Park area, which needs to be protected, and the Gibsons Creek ravine, because it's equally vulnerable to to climate damage, to potential fire, and all these areas need to be protected with very strong covenants.
Thank you, David. Anne-Marie.
Thank you. On July 12, 2022, Council passed a motion to direct staff to investigate and report on actions required to designate Charman Creek and its watershed area as a protected conservation area. I would absolutely support that. I have been supporting since the beginning. That was one of the commitments we made to protect Charman lands. And the Charman lands have also been included by another motion. So there's a motion already, there's a recommendation already, staff already has this recommendation. The next council must support this. Another action that should go ahead right away. We just finished a creek assessment and to understand the conditions of the Charman Creek. And there's already, oh my God, how to say, recommendations how to deal with the impacted areas.
Anne-Marie and Leslie.
Yes, definitely. It's important and in the interest of everybody to maintain the Shaman lands and Gospel Rock. We also have to look at creating a passage for our wildlife through these new developments that are coming up. And it is important that we communicate and engage the public in this, both the indigenous community, the local governments, and the higher up governments, because I think communication is a very, very important part of this whole thing. Not to forget that, to answer Mr. Wynn's question, that the gases, greenhouse gases are 16%, where we've got about less than 2 years to bring it up to that level, is something we should have started yesterday rather than having to think about it. So on my platform is, let's look after all these things and bring it closer to us. Thank you.
Stephanie and Greg. Oh, you're muted. Try again. You're still muted. You were unmuted and now you're muted again. Whatever you did before, Greg, worked. Try that again. You're still muted. No, there's a... Tap your space bar. That should unmute you quickly. Okay, we might have to move on, Greg, while you just practice with that. Stafford, are you raising your hand officially or just stretching?
Yeah, I couldn't find the hand raising function. So
Reactions.
I know it's been 2 years of Zoom, but I'm still somewhat challenged.
Okay, just wait for the timer.
Sure.
Greg, this is your chance to practice unmuting.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I could just say yes, because it would seem that doing anything but continuing what the previous councils have done would seem, almost reckless. But one of the big things I think is policy and making decisions behind a desk. But I mean, I did go on a walk of Gospel Rock with a SCCA member prior to the covenant, and you know what? It really pushed me into going, being really strong with staff and with the developer on completing that covenant. And I think the new council has to be in the same boat. They have to, it's one thing to make a decision behind the desk, but it's another to go out and actually commit to these areas personally. So I'd definitely be doing that again. So.
And Greg, as soon as you see the timer, please go ahead. No, you just muted yourself, Greg. You were unmuted and you just muted yourself. So just go back and do what you did before because you're muted right now. There you go.
Just over the 35 years I've been here, it's just been a shame to see bits and pieces drop away, pieces that you could think of as parks and areas such as a Gospel Rock. So yes, the work at Gospel Rock must be completed, but there is so much more, as has been mentioned, like our parks and all those places need to be taken under the wing of municipal government and put into the same category as Gospel Rock with that.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, our third question is from Judy Bonkoff, and she asks, if elected, will you support dredging in our harbor to build a private marina for the George Hotel and Residences? Are you worried about the risk of a possible blowout of the aquifer and the risk of contaminating our water supply? How will you protect our aquifer? And first up we have is Leslie. You're muted, Leslie.
Thanks, Judy, for your question. Appreciate that. It is a hot topic, has been in the past few years. From my understanding, I believe the George has put in an application again, waiting on the table for the administration to look into it. I do believe there are some changes for the better that is going to go into effect, which is nice. My understanding and my stand on it is the aquifer should not be touched. Anything that has to be built should be above the aquifer at ground level and straight up rather than down. So if we can keep that and maintain that, that would be appreciated by myself as the future mayor of Gibsons. And that just doesn't stand with just the George's development, but all other developments that are close to assets that belong to the town of Gibsons. Hope that answers your question, Judy. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. And next up is Blake.
Yeah, obviously no to dredging. That's a horrific sounding idea. I don't suppose anybody would ever support that. So no to that. We have to wait and see what the plans look like before we comment as councillors. That it's imprudent to go beyond that. And however, with regard to the aquifer, I think that was really of all the complaints that the community had around the previous incarnation of the George proposal, it was fear over the bursting or breaching of the aquifer, and really I think probably mistrust that if that were to happen, that the teams of consultants and people on site who were going to be tasked with repairing it and ensuring that the repair was done, 24-hour surveillance more or less, people didn't trust that could, and I don't blame people. So yes, but there is a construction requirement that the buildings be founded and founded.
Thank you, Blake. And next is Dez Delaney. Go ahead, Des.
Okay, so yes, as far as dredging the marina, typically fisheries have very strong regulations around that. I don't think the marina needs to be dredged at all. So as far as the aquifer, it must be protected at all costs. Any building permits must have very strong geotechnical studies based on that. It's something that I'm very familiar with and reading between the lines and looking at it. There are systems in place under the municipal government for these sorts of permits at the developer's cost to bring in third parties for reviews. There has to be a very strong transparency and understanding of all risks associated with any construction activities in an aquifer and also adjacent to the wetlands and the marina. It can be done with everybody working together, but it's, that's in the future.
Thank you, Des. And Anne Marie.
Thank you. Yeah, dredging, it's a very potential, it can breach the aquifer. I think we have legislation, we have the bylaw, the DPA 9 will protect the aquifer if council reads the technical reports and understand what the reports, because in the past, the reports identified the risks, but unfortunately, the reports did not come to council. So what I support is any risk activity that happens in this town has to be discussed at the council table, at the purview of the public. And it's the decision of council, not the decision of staff. So I think we have the consultant company, state-of-the-art Waterline and other companies that know our aquifer, and we just have to get the reports, get peer-reviewed, and bring to the council and have the discussions.
Thank you, Anne Marie. And next up is Silas.
So I've always said that any risk to the aquifer in development in this area would be a deal breaker to any development for me, and I stood by that in 2019 when council came up with a motion from the floor, which wasn't a staff recommendation, that ensured that the third-party peer review reports regarding hydrogeological concerns, geotechnical concerns with the aquifer would be followed, and they were followed. Staff really dug in on that, even against differing views from the developers' own scientists, and it hasn't happened. And I think it's a big reason. And dredging, if dredging poses a risk, like Anne Marie says, that can't happen.
Silas. David Kroll.
Thank you. You know, it's not just the George and that project dredging. When I first moved to Gibsons, we didn't have a marina. We didn't have breakwaters. That whole bay was dredged to create the marina. Smitty's marina was dredged. The government wharf was dredged. It's silting in. Sooner or later, we are going to be faced with, if we're going to support tourism, if we're going to support boating, if we're going to be a marine seaside community, we're going to have to look at dredging. But as was pointed out, we have protective measures in place. The Ministry of the Environment, DFO, the Ministry of Transportation, as well as our own protective bylaws. Right now, the repairs to the government wharf are working with our DPA 9 agreements to ensure that they don't damage the aquifer. So I think as long as the protective measures are in place and they're taken heedfully, we need to.
Thank you, David. And next, Leslie, I understand you're using your rebuttal. Is that correct? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Kylie. I just want to question Silas on that statement he just made, just to remind him that 4 years back, he excused himself when there was decisions that were wanting to be made by council for the George. So it's kind of prudent to sit back here and say that he supports that when he excused himself from that decision, which as a councillor, you are talking on behalf of the community, and that's what we are there for, is to speak the language that the community wants us to. So I just wanted to come back on that. Thanks.
And Silas using his rebuttal.
So as a counselor, it's a very important responsibility to not put yourself in a conflict of interest, to seek legal advice when you could be in a conflict. And that is what I did through the town. And it was legal advice through the staff of the town. Prior to that, we did have discussions before the final readings happened, and that is when we did put forward a motion to make sure the third-party reviews were followed, and that was not found to be in a conflict. And I can't emphasize enough that everybody running for council this term really needs to not take conflict of interest lightly, really needs to understand this is a small community. Many of us are near potential developments or could be potential developments, even a variance that your neighbor might have of their porch or something. It could be a conflict.
Thank you, Silas. And just a reminder, everybody, we'll have the floor open until 8:40. So if you have any questions that you want to pose to the candidates. Stafford, you are responding to question number 3. Is that correct? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there's all kinds of problems with that area as far as dredging goes, and even the legalese as far as access, riparian rights, all kinds of things. But remember, like, yeah, the small craft harbors have driven sheet piles through the aquifer. Things can be done correctly, but I think if we could leave it, we could leave it. We should support, if we want any more, like as far as boating goes, I mean, we should be supporting the expansion, the non-invasive expansion of the harbor. They have a plan in place to do that rather than even risk something. And as well as when we get these reports back, again, go back to the community, and it probably calls for an OCP update. And then you have the whole community behind any plans or future plans for that area. That's what I would suggest.
Thanks, Stafford. Okay, we have another question. This one is from Maureen Bodie, and she says, would you move to and/or vote for stopping gas lines going into all new buildings? First up, we have Leslie Thompson.
Thanks for your question, Maureen. I would not stop gas lines going to buildings because it is a cheaper means of energy that is being provided. Having lived in an area in the Howe Sound where there are no gas lines in that area because of the mill that is right at the end for safety reasons, we're on a propane tank. It does get quite expensive, especially in the wintertime, to try and fuel your accommodation residents with propane. So I would be in favor of going a clean energy way of dealing with things, but at the same time, it is not something that the infrastructure is geared up to accommodate right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Leslie. Go ahead, Blake.
Wow. Do we ever disagree on this, Les? The low-hanging fruit of natural gas has been picked long ago. Fracking is one of the most damaging things we can do to our aquifers. It isn't happening around here, but in the north, 5 times higher cancer rates among people living in those areas. The tailing ponds for natural gas industry and oil and gas are causing horrific destruction. The city of Vancouver has gone in that direction, acknowledged that they're phasing out natural gas. There's not going to be any more hookups, and we have abundant electric energy here. We should not be shipping natural gas out of the country. We should be phasing out of natural gas, period. It's not green, it's garbage.
Thank you, Blake. Anne-Marie.
Thank you. In theory, you can say yes. In practice, you know, many things people say, these things, I would support this and that, but at the end of the day, that we need to ask the question, are we prepared? Do we have alternatives, viable alternatives that could really make the change possible? And I'm not sure if we are. Am I open to discussion? Yes, but I want expert advice and understand feasibility of this idea. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Dez.
Yes, as a municipal elected official, this is more a provincial or a federal situation. It's a huge part of Canada's economy. BC Ferries is building ferries powered by natural gas. In the biosphere, we're building a natural gas port in wood fiber. These are billions of dollar projects that are far down. You know, that's part of some hard discussions we have to have. Yeah, sure, we've got to have them municipal-wise, sorry. But at federal and provincial is something that I think people's energy should be put into discussing it at those levels where real impacts can be made. I don't think at a municipal level we really have a lot of control over these things. So it's probably better to punt it up to where all the decisions are being made and the money's being invested.
Thank you, Des. And David.
Thank you. You know, I'm sort of in agreement with what Councillor Dandretti was saying. You know, we need to look at it with respect to viable alternatives. Through the Climate Caucus and different things that I've been involved with, I've been petitioning BC Hydro to offer, first of all, buffer their system so it is a reliable service. There are a number of areas where the power goes off, people still have heat, hot water, and can cook because they have natural gas, and their hydro's off for weeks. If, you know, so BC Hydro need to step up to the plate and buffer their system that it's more climate resilient. But I think we need to look at alternatives. Obviously, fossil fuels, natural gas is one, and we're trying to get rid of them. So we need to find that compromise, but BC Hydro needs to step up.
Thank you, David. And if you're wondering where our timer has gone, our timer has a 2-hour minimum, and so it will just be coming back on. Blake, I'm just going to manually time you. And do I understand correctly that you're using your rebuttal? Is that correct? Okay, please go ahead.
So, you know, there's so many challenges that are very difficult to overcome with regard to climate change, or the destructive effects of climate change. This one, with some cooperation among some pretty big giant players, are we afraid of Fortis? Or, like, I mean, I was involved in a conversation with the town where I asked some really tough questions of the participants in a conference, and it was the staff couldn't respond to me directly because Fortis was in the room making a lot of sort of noises about it, and it just sounded like blah blah blah. I have used natural gas, but this is the moment where we look hard at these things and figure these out. This is an easy one. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I think we've got time for one more question, if you can all try to be as brief as possible. Question number 5 is from William Baker, and he asks, will you commit to designating Charmin Forest as a park so that subsequent councils can't decide to remove trees and insert developments into this forest area? Starting first with Leslie, hoping that our timer is working. Go ahead, Leslie, I'm timing.
Hi, William. Thanks for your question. Yes, definitely, I will support that. I think removing of trees from any parks, for that matter, no matter where it is, on the Sunshine Coast or elsewhere, is not a nice thing to do. They've done a lot of that in Grantham's Landing and on upper side of Grantham's Landing. And we've realized that suddenly now, over the years, the properties down at lower Grantham's, closer to the water, are having a flooding problem. That's because the roots were absorbing the water that was right on the top, and therefore it's now not happening. So all that water is just rushing straight down. So definitely I'm in favor of not removing trees. Pretty much like Roberts Creek, where removing a tree has to be thought twice. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, and next we have is Des, and can somebody just tell me, is the timer back on, or shall I just manually do it? Looks like it's manual, so go ahead, Des.
Okay, no, absolutely. Charmin Park, the forest there must be just dedicated a park tomorrow. You know, just don't muck around with it. Also, Holland Park down in front of Town Chambers, that must revert back as soon as possible and be replanted and reclaimed. And we've got to look at a lot of other areas like that in our community where we actively and immediately start replanting and creating just assets that we can all enjoy, that we can see the results of. And I mean, the Charmin Park, that is so many people, including myself, it's just, you know, to go and walk in that forest with the dogs, or with people with their dogs, see other members of the community. It's just, you can't measure that. You can't measure that. It's just, that's such a huge part of where we live and what makes it so enjoyable. So it must be preserved along with all these other areas. Thanks.
Thank you, Des. And Blake.
Yeah, so that area, there's so much going on there with the White Tower Park and the reclamation or repairs of the Sharman Creek, 2 kilometers long, and there's a lot of areas of it that have been identified that need fixing up and naturalizing. The pathway that goes through the English Trail that goes through those lands, I'm surprised at how few people in the town know about that and experience that. As Des was mentioning, it's just an amazing place to be. In the heat dome, that would be a place of refuge for people. I'd like to see more benches put along that trail. And absolutely, with the healing forest initiative that we're engaging with, the town's engaging with, that I just can't see that land doing anything other than becoming more precious and more acknowledged by the greater community and an attraction for tourism.
Thank you, Blake. David.
Thank you. You know, as mentioned earlier, we are working to put a protective covenant on the Sharman Creek ravine. I'm certainly advocating that the White Tower land should be included in it, and we should also move to include the Gibsons Creek. You know, a park dedication can be revoked. A protective covenant, once it's registered, gives the whole process a little more teeth. So I'm all for the protective covenant, and I'd like to see it expanded into both the White Tower Park and the Gibsons Creek. And thank you, Blake, for mentioning the healing forest, because Gibsons is the only town in the entire province that has dedicated an area for healing forest. And that's something I'm very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next up is Silas.
So this is land that is not designated for development in the OCP. So I can't imagine any council, especially going in to develop it. And also we need an OCP update soon too. So that's going to be a key time when the whole community can have a look at lands all over, and it won't be the decision of one candidate here. It will be something that the whole community discusses. I have a wonderful history with this land. It's near my house. I use it all the time. I bike, I walk, and I even for a few days helped build the trail, which we actually renamed. Even we named that trail that runs up to Engels Trail after Helen Elk. And I want to move forward on dedicating.
Phil Young. You need to unmute yourself, Phil. You're muted, Phil. We can't hear you, Phil.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Go for
So
it.
far, I learned one thing here. Gibson is losing ground. In what way? In the tree covering percentage. In the past, it is 30%. Right now, reduced to 25%. Exactly going backward, not forward. We are looking forward to increasing this percentage from 30 up to 30 up to 36. That is better. So that is my little bit conclusion, okay, about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil. Anne-Marie.
Is it possible to repeat the question, because my sound went bad, and I just want to, I know it's about Sharman land, but I don't want.
The question is, will you commit to designating Sharman Forest as a park so that subsequent councils can't decide to remove trees and insert developments into this forest area?
Thank you, absolutely. And I think that was the intention of council with this motion passed on July 12 for staff to investigate and report on actions required to designate Sharman and watershed areas protected. I also very positive that the update of DPA 2, our environmental update, would make recommendations in this regard, because we're talking about an area that has a ravine, and you have the creek and have all these riparian areas, and obviously it's prone to erosion, and we need to protect this area. I'm absolutely will support that.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And finally, Greg. Oh, you're muted, Greg.
Absolutely committed to it, living near it, using it. And as we know, still being a town of tourism where these gems don't always exist. It's a very easy commitment to make to have that happen. Support it.
Thank you, Greg. All right, so that closes the open question part of the evening. And so now I'm just going to call on all the candidates for a 1-minute concluding remarks. So we will start first of all with David Kroll.
Thank you. First of all, or once again, I'd like to thank the SCCA for affording us this opportunity. And I'd like to thank all the people that have joined us this evening. Climate is something that I've been screaming about since 1968. And it was a petition to try and get the Ontario government to stop burning coal for generating power. So climate, and it was the impacts of, of acid rain and things like that that were impacting the environment. My values haven't changed. We need to be very careful of what we do that we can leave future generations something of value. I have young nieces and nephews, and I just very concerned about their future. We also have to look to engaging our youth, the youth of today, to working with us, because they have a very loud voice and can be utilized. So thank you for your time.
And next we have Anne-Marie. You're muted, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, thanks to SCCA for this opportunity to engage with the public in this very important area. I have my mind and my heart in the environment, always had. And I always thought that without the environment, there's no economy. And without the environment, there's no community. So obviously, environment is priority over anything else. And I also appreciate being able to work with the SCCA. I know it has not always been easy, but I'm really delighted that at the very we managed to create the conservation covenant, and I see that from now on we will have very fruitful relationship with the SCCA with regard to environmental protection, and I look forward to continuing with other governments as well and other organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And next is Dez Delaney.
Great. Well, this has been just a great conversation. A lot of people here and a lot of agreement. I mean, really, regardless of the outcome of this election, it looks like there's a lot of commitment across the board, regardless of any other views that we have. And you know, we've all got a lot to contribute to make sure that it happens. And the sooner it happens, the better. This is an incredible community we live in. Lots of people, I think we'll all really share the same values, and that's why we live here. And that's why something like this is so important to us, because it plays such a large part of our lives. And I know that's really what's driving my decision to get involved, to try and preserve this in the best way that we can. We still need to thrive with an economy, but we don't want to sacrifice what we already have. So great discussion, and thanks everybody for putting this on and attending it. It was just, I think it was a great positive thing for going forward.
Thank you, Des. And next we have Stafford Lumley.
Thanks, Kylie, and thank you for moderating, and thanks to the SCCA. And what I do know is I don't know a lot. There's a lot more smarter people out there with respect to the environment. I'm sure every single person on this panel is concerned about the environment. And that's why when people come to this town, they think it's a little hidden gem. I think we have to keep it that way. So I think that in a town that's so small, is strapped, stretch itself thin with staff and council, I look forward to working with and getting help from the SCCA and other groups that can help us make important decisions with respect to the environment. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Stafford. Next is Blake Mcleod.
Yeah, so in my campaign platform, I include meaningful environmental policy as a top priority. And this through this evening, I've come to understand more about what that must mean. My first term priorities include support for climate change resilient strategies, aquifer and recharge area protection, naturalize and protect streams and riparian zones, support enhanced water resource infrastructure. These are literal references to the climate emergency at the local level. Moving further into my commitments for my first term, I list support for proponents of sustainable development, supporting enhanced vehicle charging for Gibsons, support for expanded active transportation modalities. There will be many challenges and I will work hard with colleagues to meet them head on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Blake. And next is Greg. Oh, go back, Greg. You're muted. Try again. Unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to leave you to figure that out and we'll go to Leslie and then we'll go back to Greg. So just work on, oh, there you go. Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks to the SCCA as well and the attendees, and as well my colleagues with me up here as candidates. As has been mentioned, this is a town of tourism. For 35 years, I've watched it change, but we're at a very important time and we've got collaboration that is evident right amongst this group. We have a direction to go with it. And I think it's a very appropriate time to have everybody pull together on the climate caucus and all of the things that have been mentioned this evening, and looking forward to working with my colleagues in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And next up is Leslie.
Thanks, Kylie, and thanks to the SCCA and all the audience listening to us. It's been a great conversation, and it's nice to see that we're all open about it. A few things that I'd like to get you thinking about is we need to mitigate greenhouse gases. So let's try and work towards that. Let's try and build a net zero ready structures on the Sunshine Coast, rather than because in the next 20 to 2030, by then we should try and aim for that, which is important. And I'd like to invite Silas to our business, the More Cafe, for a glass of the world's best water at no charge. And go ahead and vote. You've got a good selection of candidates out here, but your vote means a lot to every individual one of us. So you've either got a choice of the last 4 years of council or a change for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Silas, you're up.
I've got the water right here, and it's zone 1 water too, unchlorinated. So regarding this conversation, a really big platform piece that I have is that we need to continue talking about climate action, and we need to push climate action as a community, not just hope that it's see that it's in the OCP, or hope that council make sure that we have electric vehicles in our fleet. We need to push it as a community. And one thing we didn't talk about, unfortunately, is transit. Another big priority of mine is to make sure we have a Gibsons bus, and that be a priority in the next BC transit round. Rather than big buses that go all up and down the coast with few people in them. We could fill that bus going up and down the coast.
Silas. And last is Phil Young. Just unmute yourself, Phil. You're still muted, Phil. You need to unmute yourself. Sorry, Phil, we can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay. I'm the last,
You're
but
the
not
last,
the least.
but not the least.
We have to do our best to do the best economy. It includes natural resources, employment, standard of living, water and wastewater treatment, and also, last of all, rejuvenation. Rejuvenation including many things here. For example, infrastructure. For example, vessel, ferry. For example, other means of communication. Other means of transporting people from place A to place B. This is important for us, okay, to let Gibson survive in a better manner. And I thank you so much for all people who organized this evening's event and people who joined us this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is Philip. Thank you.
Phil. So I know that election day is until October the 15th, but I do think that the big winner tonight is the timer. It's just did a wonderful job of corralling everybody. But I do want to thank all of the candidates for coming out tonight, for taking the time to provide their responses. And I also just want to thank all of you for stepping up for local government and democracy. I just want to make the point that the SCCA is available to work with you if elected on all of these issues. I also want to acknowledge all of the staff that have helped out from the SCCA tonight. We have Riley and Alea and Suzanne and Anthony and Dawn as well. And then of course their partners, Alliance for Democracy and the Sunshine Coast Climate Action Network. And then finally, I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight as citizens and for sharing your interest and showing an interest in local government and democracy. So there's a bunch of links that are going into the chat right now. One of them is some information from the SCCA website with responses to the questions. And there's also just a reminder about voting. So advanced voting is coming up next week, starting October the 5th and the 11th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then general voting day is obviously October 15th, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Candidates, if you have any other information that you'd like to share in the chat, please go ahead and do that. And obviously anybody else on the call, have a look for that. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, everyone. Good night.